The flagship Dominion's wrath loomed like a shadow against the vast emptiness of space. Its sleek, dark hull stretched endlessly, a monument to the Galactic Empire's power. Every inch of the ship seemed to pulse with life, energy, and authority, as if the very vessel itself was a living force. The hum of its engines vibrated through the halls, a constant reminder of the might of the Empire. In the heart of this beast stood Admiral Kalen Drask, a man as cold and calculated as the void outside. His sharp eyes flicked across the vast star map on the command screen, his thoughts as orderly and precise as the Empire he commanded. Drask's tall, imposing figure was bathed in a dim glow of the map, his dark armor gleaming faintly. The weight of his years of service to the Empire was etched into his face, but his expression was one of relentless focus. Nothing escaped his attention, not the ships under his command, not the sectors of space he governed, and certainly not the smallest speck that dared to enter his domain. Next to him stood Zara, his second-in-command. Her striking Volary features were calm, but her presence radiated an energy of quiet intensity. She was the strategist, the mind behind many of Drask's decisions, and she watched the map with keen eyes, sensing things beyond the surface. Her silver-tipped hair caught the soft light of the command center, a contrast to the deep shadows of space. The silence between them was heavy, almost suffocating, as they both surveyed the star map. For a brief moment, it was as if the universe itself was holding its breath. A small, unremarkable ship had crossed the boundary of Imperial space, and on the vast, intricate map, it stood out like a solitary dot, a tiny speck against the infinite expanse. Drask's hand moved across the controls with an almost dismissive gesture. "What is this?" he muttered under his breath, his voice barely a whisper. His eyes narrowed, scanning the unremarkable ship. It was far too small, its design lacking the elegance and complexity of Imperial ships. Smooth, featureless, and crude in construction, the ship seemed like an afterthought. A minor species, no doubt, Drask sneered, his voice full of contempt. They think they can just waltz into our space. How quaint. He leaned in closer to the map, his fingers brushing over the unfamiliar vessel. It was a nuisance, nothing more. A mistake. A ship from some insignificant species that didn't know its place. Zara stood still, her gaze locked on the tiny vessel. Despite Drask's dismissive attitude, something in the back of her mind gnawed at her. This ship, it didn't belong here. Its sudden appearance in the heart of the Empire's domain was far too deliberate. Perhaps it was a trick, or perhaps the Empire had underestimated something greater. Zara didn't speak, but the way her fingers tapped lightly against her console betrayed her thoughts. She was always cautious, unwilling to dismiss anything too quickly, especially in a galaxy as vast and unpredictable as theirs. Drask straightened, his eyes flashing with an almost predatory gleam. "Send a transmission. Let's see what they want." His voice was filled with an air of indifference, but Zara could sense the subtle change in his demeanor. Even someone as hardened as Drask couldn't ignore the unknown. This ship had stirred something in him. He didn't simply want to eliminate it, he wanted to understand it. Zara nodded, her fingers flying across the console as she sent the transmission. Her expression remained composed, but internally, she wondered what would unfold next. This was an unexpected development, one that could unravel things they hadn't planned for. As the communication channel opened, Zara could almost feel Drask's curiosity mounting. Seconds passed in tense silence, the crew around them frozen in place as the transmission connected. The screen flickered before coming to life, revealing an image of the human vessel. The face that appeared on the screen was far from the intimidating presence Drask had expected. The human captain, standing tall and confident, had an air of determination about him. His face was calm, But there was something in his eyes, an unspoken understanding of the stakes at play. "I am Captain Orion West of the human vessel, Vanguard," the man said. His voice was firm, but there was a palpable tension in it, as if he was already aware of the odds stacked against him. "We come in peace, representatives of humanity, seeking diplomatic relations with the Galactic Empire." Drask stared at the screen, his mind racing. Humanity. A species that had only recently ventured beyond its home planet, now claiming to have crossed into the Empire's territory with a ship that was anything but advanced by Imperial standards. His expression hardened. "Your ship," he began slowly, "is primitive. Your technology is crude. How did you—" Before he could finish, Zara leaned closer, watching the human captain carefully. West's calm demeanor intrigued her. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he stood, that suggested he was not easily intimidated. He was confident, almost too confident for someone from a species that had only just discovered how to travel through the stars. Drask's voice broke the silence. "How did you manage to breach Imperial space with such a ship?" His tone was sharp, accusatory. "We developed our faster-than-light travel independently," Captain West replied without hesitation. His words were firm, but there was an undercurrent of doubt in his voice. Did Drask believe him? Did he even care? "You must be lying," Drask snapped. "No species develops that kind of technology without guidance. There's no way a species like yours could achieve this on your own." His eyes narrowed, his distrust palpable. He had no intention of letting a small, unremarkable species like humanity infiltrate Imperial space without knowing exactly how they had done it. There was something more here, something that didn't add up. The human captain remained unfazed. "I assure you, Admiral, we have no hidden agendas. We only wish to exchange knowledge and learn from other intelligent species," he said, his voice steady. For a moment, Drask was silent. He studied the human captain, his mind weighing the situation carefully. The unassuming appearance of the human ship, its simplicity, made Drask believe it was nothing more than a fluke, a momentary glitch in the Empire's rule. But there was something about the captain's demeanor, something about the calmness in his voice, that made Drask pause. Could it be true? Could humanity have truly achieved such a technological feat on its own? "Prepare to be boarded," Drask declared suddenly, his tone turning harsh. "We will see for ourselves if your claims are legitimate. And if they are, perhaps we will consider your offer." But Captain West shook his head. "We refuse to be boarded. We are not seeking to join any empire. We are an independent species, and we demand to be treated as equals." Drask's eyes flashed with fury. "Equality," he spat, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. "There is no equality in the galaxy. There is only the Empire. You will serve the Empire or be crushed by it." His voice grew darker, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a threat. Zara's fingers hovered nervously over the console. She had seen this before, an arrogance born from power. But this was different. This wasn't just a simple refusal, this was a species standing tall in the face of overwhelming might. The tension in the room was palpable, the fate of humanity now hanging by a thread. And so, the first spark of conflict ignited. The battle had only just begun. The Vanguard was quiet, its metallic surface gleaming faintly in the endless dark of space. It was a humble ship, designed for exploration and communication, nothing like the massive, intimidating warships of the Galactic Empire. But in this moment, it was humanity's hope, a beacon of their first step into the unknown. Inside the ship, Captain Orion West stood alone on the command deck, staring at the shimmering stars outside. His fingers brushed the cold console, and his heart raced with a mixture of excitement and fear. This was the moment, the first real encounter with another species, the first true test of humanity's place in the cosmos. The weight of the situation settled on him like a heavy cloak, but his resolve never wavered. He would not let humanity falter now, not when everything was at stake. Beside him stood Lieutenant Ilra Finn, her eyes sharp, scanning the information that was now rapidly filling the screens. She was calm, composed, but her body language betrayed the tension of the situation. This was the first real challenge for both of them: Captain West, who had led humanity's exploration into space, and Lieutenant Finn, who had fought to make sure they stayed united. "Are we ready?" Captain West asked, his voice steady but tinged with a sense of awe. His gaze was fixed on the display in front of him, where a tiny blip marked the arrival of the Empire's flagship. "Everything is set, Captain," Ilra replied, her voice unwavering. "We've prepared for this moment. Humanity is ready." The communication screen in front of them flickered and hummed to life. The cold, imposing face of Admiral Kalen Drask filled the screen. His expression was one of utter authority, his dark eyes piercing through the transmission. Behind him, the looming structure of his flagship could be seen, a massive, menacing silhouette that cast a shadow over everything it touched. The atmosphere in the Vanguard's command deck grew thick, as if the weight of the Admiral's presence had physically entered the room. "Who are you?" Drask demanded, his voice cold, his tone sharp. "Identify yourselves." Captain West inhaled deeply, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for. He stepped forward, standing tall. "This is Captain Orion West of the human vessel, Vanguard," he began, his voice firm, though it carried a trace of the nervousness he felt. "We come in peace, representatives of humanity. We wish to establish peaceful relations with your species." There was a long pause, an eerie silence stretching between them, as Drask's expression did not change. His eyes seemed to study Captain West, and for a moment, West wondered what the Admiral was thinking. Would they accept humanity's overture, or would they treat this as another insignificant species to be crushed under the weight of the Empire's might? Finally, Drask's lips curled into a thin smile, one that was far from reassuring. The silence was broken with a low, mocking laugh that echoed through the communication system. "Peace?" Drask's voice was filled with contempt. "You, humans, dare speak of peace?" He leaned forward slightly, his gaze becoming more intense. "Your species, so young, so primitive. You've barely stepped beyond your own world, and yet you claim to come in peace. You've just learned to crawl in the grand expanse of space. How quaint." Drask shook his head in disbelief, his smirk widening. "And what's more, you claim to have developed faster than light technology on your own. Impossible. No species could ever achieve such a feat without the aid of others." Captain West's chest tightened. He knew the Admiral's disbelief was growing, but he could not allow himself to show hesitation. He had to convince them, somehow. "We've developed it independently," West said firmly, holding Drask's gaze. "Our scientists, our engineers, they've worked tirelessly to make this possible. Humanity did it on its own. We don't need anyone's help." Drask's laugh died out, and his expression turned to one of cold skepticism. He glanced toward someone off-screen, his sharp eyes never leaving West. "You claim such an achievement, yet your technology looks so rudimentary. How could your species, with your primitive ships, possibly have done this alone?" Captain West remained composed, though the weight of Drask's words pressed heavily on him. He had known this would be difficult, but there was a part of him, a small flicker of hope, that wished the Admiral would understand. Humanity had worked so hard for this moment every step of the way, they had pushed the limits of what was thought possible. "We didn't steal our technology," West replied, his voice gaining strength. "We've worked for it. And we offer it to you freely, if you're willing to listen." Drask's eyes narrowed as he took in the words, clearly unconvinced. The silence between them stretched again, thick with unspoken judgment. Finally, Drask spoke, his voice cold and commanding. "Your species has no place in the Empire. You are nothing more than a fleeting curiosity, something to be observed, perhaps, but nothing more. We will not entertain the speech you offer. I will have your vessel boarded immediately." His hand hovered over a control, the gleam of power in his eyes unmistakable. Captain West's heart raced, but he didn't flinch. His crew looked to him for guidance, and he could see in their eyes the same mixture of fear and resolve. He had to be the one to lead them, to keep humanity's dignity intact. "We refuse to be boarded," West said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We are not here to serve your empire. We are an independent species, and we will not bow to anyone." Drask's face twisted in contempt, his lips curling into a snarl. "You misunderstand, human. This is not a request. You will comply, or you will be crushed. I will make sure of it." The communication cut off abruptly, leaving the command deck of the Vanguard in eerie silence. The weight of the Admiral's threat hung in the air, and Captain West knew their situation had just become far more dangerous. But his resolve did not waver. His people had come a long way to get to this point, and they weren't going to let anyone, not even the Galactic Empire, dictate their future. "Prepare the ship," West said, turning to his crew. "We will stand our ground. Whatever happens, we fight for humanity's place in this universe." The silence of space was shattered by the low hum of the Vanguard's engines, a humble vessel in comparison to the vast, majestic fleet of the Galactic Empire. Ahead, the Dominion's Wrath, the flagship of the Empire, loomed large like a predator stalking its prey. The stars themselves seemed to dim in its shadow, as if even they knew the might of what lay before them. Captain Orion West stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the rapidly approaching Imperial fleet. His heart beat faster, adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He had hoped for peace, but the icy tone of Admiral Kalen Drask had made it clear, humanity would not be allowed to walk freely among the stars. This was no longer a diplomatic mission. This was a fight for survival. Behind him, the crew of the Vanguard was tense, watching the massive Imperial ships on the view screen. Lieutenant Laura Finn stood beside the captain, her sharp gaze scanning the Imperial formation. She knew the odds they were against them. The Vanguard was smaller, less equipped, and not nearly as powerful as the Imperial fleet. But there was one advantage they had: speed. As Captain West took a deep breath, he knew what had to be done. "Prepare to engage evasive maneuvers," he said, his voice steady, despite the storm of emotions brewing inside him. This wasn't just about them anymore, it was about humanity's future. Admiral Drask's voice crackled through the comms, cold and unforgiving. "You have made a grave mistake, Captain West. You will submit to the Empire's will or be destroyed." Captain West's eyes narrowed, his pulse quickening. "We refuse to bow to any empire," he responded firmly. There was no hesitation in his voice. He wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. With a swift motion, Drask issued the order. "Fire a warning shot. Show them the power of the Empire." The command was coldly obeyed, and within moments, the Dominion's Wrath unleashed a beam of emerald energy. It ripped through the void, a streak of green light heading straight for the Vanguard. The tension in the air thickened, the entire crew holding their breath as the weapon neared. At the last possible second, Captain West turned the helm. The ship lurched violently as the Vanguard veered sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding the deadly beam. The warning shot missed completely, striking nothing but empty space. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then, it was as if the universe itself held its breath. Then, the first blast of cannon fire came. A surge of energy from the Imperial fleet lit up the blackness of space as the Empire's ships unleashed their might. The Vanguard rocked with the impact of the blasts, the force of the hits felt deep in the ship's hull. But the Vanguard was built for speed, and Captain West's quick thinking kept them in motion. With a flick of his hand, he sent the ship into another series of tight maneuvers, narrowly evading another round of blasts. The Dominion's Wrath fired again, its massive guns thundering through space. But once more, the Vanguard darted to the side, its agile movements causing the shots to miss. The enemy's aim was good, but the Vanguard was better, faster, more unpredictable. The crew worked together like a finely tuned instrument, responding to the captain's every order. Despite the chaos, West felt a surge of hope. They weren't going to make this easy. He could sense it in every movement, every calculated dodge, and every shift in speed. Humanity had the one thing the Empire had forgotten, the power of determination. "Keep moving," Captain West shouted, his voice booming through the comms. "We need to outrun them. Now." The Vanguard's engines roared to life, pushing the ship even faster, slicing through the stars with an intensity that sent tremors through the crew. The Imperial fleet, massive and lumbering, was already falling behind. But it was clear the Empire would not let them go so easily. As West's eyes flicked to the view screen, the image of the Dominion's Wrath was growing larger again. The chase had only just begun. Lieutenant Finn moved swiftly, scanning the enemy's movements. "They are adapting quickly, Captain. They are changing their formation. They are not giving up." West nodded, his brow furrowing as he saw the Imperial ships shifting into a more calculated position, closing in on the Vanguard. Their massive size and heavy firepower might have been a disadvantage in speed, but now they were using their sheer numbers to surround the smaller human ship. "They'll follow us until we're cornered," Captain West muttered under his breath. He clenched his fists. This wasn't a simple fight, this was a test. For humanity's future. "Plot a course back to Earth," West ordered. "We need to reach our space station, but we can't let them catch us. Do whatever it takes to keep them off our tail." The Vanguard shot forward once more, cutting through the cosmos at a dizzying pace. The Imperial fleet followed, relentless. The Vanguard weaved and dodged, dancing between the incoming blasts of green energy, its crew working in perfect harmony. West's heart was in his throat as he watched the star systems blur around them. He knew their window of escape was closing fast. The Vanguard had speed, but how long could it hold out against the might of the Empire? The distance between the Vanguard and the Dominion's Wrath slowly began to shrink. And as the stars rushed past them, Captain West knew this chase could only end in one of two ways, escape or destruction. With a determined look, he turned to Lieutenant Finn. "They won't catch us," he said, his voice low and filled with conviction. "Not today." The tension inside the Vanguard was almost unbearable, thick enough to cut with a knife. The sound of the ship's engines pulsed in the background, a steady reminder of the incredible speed at which they were hurtling through the void of space. Captain Orion West stood at the center of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The Imperial fleet loomed behind them, massive and relentless, a wall of steel and firepower that seemed to swallow the stars around them. Outside, the vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, but within the Vanguard, everything felt cramped, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Lieutenant Ilra Finn stood beside the captain, her hands flying over the controls, the only thing between them and total destruction. The others were busy, too, each person fully aware of the gravity of the situation. The crew's silence was a testament to the pressure they all felt. There was no room for error. The Imperial fleet was gaining on them. They had speed, yes, but the Empire's ships were vast, powerful, and well-equipped. Their weapons could tear the Vanguard apart in a single blow if they were caught. Captain West knew that, and yet he kept pushing them forward, refusing to give in. The idea of surrender was unthinkable. "They are getting closer, Captain," Ilra Finn said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "We can't keep this up forever." Captain West's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice," he said, the words coming out more forcefully than he intended. His hands gripped the console as he watched the Imperial ship slowly gaining on them. The adrenaline in his veins surged, his mind racing with calculations. They had to get out. They had to survive. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Captain." It was Dr. Alaric Vega, the xenobiologist who had been quietly monitoring the ship's systems. His voice was calm, but the edge in it was unmistakable. "I don't need to tell you how serious this is. We're pushing the Vanguard's systems to their absolute limits. At this rate, we won't be able to keep up the fight. Our shields are already showing signs of fatigue. The engines are running at full capacity." Captain West turned to look at Dr. Vega, his brow furrowed. The man was right, of course. The Vanguard wasn't designed for prolonged combat, and against the Empire's overwhelming firepower, they couldn't afford to keep this up for much longer. But Captain West was not about to give up. Not now. Not when they had come so far. "We'll find a way," he said, his voice low but resolute. His words were not just for the crew, but for himself as well. He had to believe it. He had no other choice. The crew continued to work in perfect unison, their eyes fixed on the controls and the Imperial ships closing in. West's thoughts flickered to Earth, to humanity's future. This was it. The moment that would determine whether or not they could carve out a place in the stars. He wouldn't let them fall here. Then, Lieutenant Finn spoke again, her voice calm but urgent. "Captain, there's a gap. One of the Imperial ships, the Phantom, has slightly veered off course. We might be able to exploit it." West's eyes narrowed as he scanned the situation. There it was. The opening they had been waiting for. "We need to act fast," he said, turning toward his crew. "Prepare to execute counterattack protocol. Ilra, get us into position." Without a moment's hesitation, the Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring as it darted toward the gap in the Imperial formation. West could feel the ship tremble under the strain, but he pushed the crew to move faster, their coordinated efforts driving them forward with purpose. The Vanguard's weapons, though less powerful than the Empire's, had been designed with an unconventional frequency. It was their trump card, one that they had hoped they wouldn't have to use. But now, as the gap grew smaller and the Imperial ships closed in, Captain West knew that it was time. "Now!" West barked. With a flash of brilliant light, the Vanguard unleashed a surprise counterattack. The ship's primary weapon, tuned to a frequency that was unfamiliar to the Empire, struck with deadly precision. A wave of energy swept across the nearest Imperial ship's communication and sensor systems. Sparks flew across the control panels of the Vanguard, but the result was immediate. Several of the Empire's ships staggered, their communications jammed, and their sensors fried. The Vanguard used the chaos to its advantage, darting to the side as the Imperial ships scrambled to regain control. For a moment, the Vanguard was free, But West knew it wouldn't last long. The Empire would regroup, and their pursuit would continue. Still, they had bought themselves time. For now, they had escaped the jaws of the Empire's monstrous fleet. As the Vanguard shot forward into the depths of space, Captain West exhaled slowly, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. They had done the impossible, they had struck back. The Empire had underestimated them. "We're not done yet," West muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time since this battle began, he felt something stir inside him, a glimmer of victory. The underground Space Command facility on Earth was bathed in a dim, almost somber light. The air smelled faintly of metal and ozone, a constant reminder of the war that was looming over them. Deep beneath the surface, in a hidden bunker shielded from the world above, the crew of the Vanguard gathered to share the news of their battle with the Empire. Their faces were tired, etched with the strain of the past few days, but there was also something else in their eyes, an unspoken sense of hope. The walls of the command room hummed with a low buzz of machinery, the soft whir of computers as data was pored over by the technicians. The atmosphere was heavy with a quiet urgency, the kind that comes when humanity stands on the edge of something far greater than itself. Captain Orion West stood at the center, the weight of the crew's shared experience pressing down on him. He had seen the battle up close, he had felt the sting of Imperial firepower, the uncertainty of the fight, but most of all, he had seen the spark of resilience in his crew, a spark that was now spreading beyond their ranks. As the last of the reports were given, Lieutenant Illyra Finn turned to face West, her voice low but certain. "Captain, the message we sent out, it's working. We've received signals from several alien species under Imperial rule." West's brow furrowed, his fatigue momentarily forgotten. "Who?" he asked, his voice sharp with curiosity. "Who's reaching out to us?" Illyra glanced at the screen, her eyes scanning the data that was now coming through in a rush. "The Aquilus, the Krixii, and the Zinthar all have sent their support. They've been watching, and they want to help." West took a slow breath, letting the weight of her words sink in. The Aquilus, a race of sentient plants whose delicate, bioluminescent bodies thrived on the energy of their environment. The Krixii, an engineering species with a knack for creating advanced, biomechanical technology. And the Zinthar, beings of pure energy who had been forced into servitude by the Empire for centuries. These were species that had suffered under Imperial control, their worlds crushed, their cultures oppressed. But now, they were offering their help to humanity. "It's unbelievable," West murmured. "I never expected them to reach out, not after everything the Empire has done to them." "Neither did I," Illyra said, her voice soft with awe. "But they've seen something in us, Captain. They see that humanity is different. We're not like the others. We're willing to fight for our freedom, no matter the cost." West's mind raced. Their fight was no longer just their own. It was becoming something larger, something far more dangerous. The Empire, though mighty, had no idea what it was up against. For the first time, Earth was not alone. A new message came through, this time from the Aquilus. Their leader, a towering being of green-tinted foliage and glowing veins, appeared on the screen. "We offer our assistance, humans," the Aquilus leader said, their voice resonating with an ancient, musical cadence. "We have watched your battle with the Empire. You have proven yourselves strong, and in you, we see the possibility of freedom. We will share our knowledge of bioengineering, our understanding of the natural energy fields that sustain our life. It is yours to use, to defend yourselves." West stood tall as the message ended, his mind already whirring with the possibilities. The Aquilus had technology that could change the tide of war, advanced biological systems that could offer humanity a new edge. The next message came from the Kriegsei, their form half machine, half organic, standing at the threshold of two worlds. "We have studied the Empire's technology for centuries," the Kriegsei ambassador said, his voice deep and mechanical. "We can teach you how to break their defenses, how to build weapons that even they cannot predict. We offer you our skills in engineering, in creating weapons that will bring them to their knees." West's mind raced. The Kriegsei were the engineers, the crafters of advanced weapons. With their knowledge, humanity could learn how to break the Empire's technological supremacy. Finally, the Zinthar appeared on screen. Unlike the others, the Zinthar did not have a physical form. They were beings of energy, flickering like distant stars. Their voice was a soft hum, a frequency that vibrated within the bones of those who heard it. "We offer our knowledge of energy," the Zinthar said, their presence pulsing gently on the screen. "The Empire cannot control what they do not understand. But we can teach you. We can give you the power to strike from the shadows, to become something the Empire cannot see, cannot predict." West's eyes were wide with disbelief. The Zinthar could teach them to manipulate energy itself, to bend it to their will. With this, they could become a force the Empire couldn't even fathom. "We're not alone anymore," West said, the weight of it sinking into his chest. "These species they've been oppressed just like us. And now they are offering to fight with us. We've got a chance." Ilra stepped forward, her eyes sparkling with determination. "We can do this. Together, we can defeat them." The Vanguard's crew had always known they were up against the odds. But now, with these new allies and their advanced technologies, humanity had a fighting chance. The Empire had underestimated them, and now, it was time for them to learn just how wrong they were. "We'll make them regret ever underestimating us," West said, his voice filled with a fire he hadn't felt before. He turned to the screen where the alien leaders had appeared. "Tell them we accept their help. We're ready to fight. Together." And so, the seeds of an unexpected alliance were sown. The Empire had thought humanity was nothing more than a small, insignificant species. But with these new allies by their side, humanity was about to show the galaxy just how much power one species could have when they fought for their freedom. The first step had been taken. The road ahead was uncertain, but Captain West knew one thing: humanity was no longer alone in this fight. And with these new allies, the Empire would soon learn that the strength of a united front was not something to be taken lightly. The air inside Earth's secret space facility was thick with anticipation. The walls hummed with a steady pulse of machinery, the sound echoing through the expansive underground complex. Outside, beneath layers of rock and earth, the hidden hangars stretched into vast chambers, where the next phase of humanity's war was being forged in silence. This was a place known to few, and even fewer had ever set foot in it. The heart of humanity's defense now beat deep below the surface, hidden away from the prying eyes of the Empire. At the center of it all stood Admiral Zara Velk, a woman of few words but boundless resolve. Her dark eyes scanned the massive hangar before her, filled with the faint scent of oil, burning metal, and the sharp tang of plasma welders. The ships, each a work of advanced engineering, lay spread out in various stages of construction. They were beautiful in their own right, not in the elegant, polished style of the Imperial ships, but in their raw power and practicality. Each one was a testament to the new world that was being born, a world that refused to bow to the Empire. Standing beside her was a team of engineers who had worked tirelessly to integrate alien technology into the designs of the Vanguard's upgraded sibling ships. The air was thick with the heat of labor, sparks flying as the construction workers welded the final pieces into place. The first ship, the Titanus, was a warship of unparalleled power. Its hull was jagged and angular, designed for pure destruction. The ship was built to take on the might of the Imperial fleet and deliver devastating blows. Its weapons systems, an amalgamation of alien and human design, hummed with potential, waiting for the day they would be unleashed. Titanus was a force of nature, a ship built to stand toe-to-toe with the Empire itself. Next to it, the Arrow stood, sleek and fast, like a blade waiting to strike. It was a reconnaissance ship, designed to be fast and undetectable. With its stealth capabilities, it could slip past Imperial defenses undetected, gathering intelligence and relaying it back to the fleet. Arrow wasn't about power, it was about speed and precision, a tool for gathering vital information that could turn the tide of the war. Lastly, there was the Wraith, a heavily armed warship designed for a brutal, no-holds-barred approach. Its massive turrets were designed to pierce through even the toughest Imperial armor, and its energy shields were reinforced with alien technology to withstand the Empire's most powerful attacks. Wraith was a weapon of destruction, a ship meant to punch a hole through the heart of the Imperial fleet. As Admiral Valk walked slowly through the hangar, her hands clasped behind her back, she studied the ships with a critical eye. There was no room for error. These ships, and the men and women who would command them, were the last line of defense for Earth. The Imperial fleet was vast, and their first encounter had shown just how powerful they were. But these ships, they were something different. They were the embodiment of humanity's will to survive. The crews had already been chosen, trained in the art of combat and strategy. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. There was still much to be done. These ships might be powerful, but they were not invincible. The crews needed to learn how to fight together, how to operate these complex, alien-enhanced ships to their fullest potential. They needed to become something more than just soldiers, they needed to become a force that could push back against the Empire. As she stood in front of Titanus, Admiral Valk allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The war they were about to fight would define humanity's future. Every choice they made now, every tactic they used, would determine whether or not they would survive. She had no illusions about the difficulty ahead. The Empire would not fall easily. But Valk had seen what humans were capable of. They had been underestimated before, and now, they had the power to change the course of history. The sound of boots on metal echoed behind her, and she turned to see Lieutenant Olivia Daniels approaching, her expression serious. "The Wraith is ready for its first round of tests, Admiral," she reported, her voice steady. Valk nodded, her eyes never leaving the ship. "Good. We'll need to make sure it's ready for whatever comes next." Daniels hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "And the Arrow? The crew's still not fully trained on the stealth systems. They're still a bit shaky." "Then we train them harder," Valk said with quiet determination. "We don't have the luxury of time. The Empire won't wait for us to catch up." As Daniels nodded and turned to leave, Valk's gaze lingered on the ships before her. The Titanus, a warship of unimaginable power. The Arrow, a ghost in the darkness, fast and deadly. And the Wraith, a hammer of destruction. These ships represented everything humanity had worked for. They were the culmination of years of struggle, of sweat, and sacrifice. The training was grueling, the pressure on the crews immense. But it was their only chance. Valk knew that the coming battle would not be decided by weapons alone, it would be decided by those who wielded them, by the strength of their resolve. These ships, though powerful, needed the hearts and minds of their crews to truly succeed. Admiral Valk turned and walked away from the hangar, her mind already focused on the next steps. There was no time for hesitation, no time for doubt. The Empire was coming, and Earth was ready to meet them head-on. The heavy silence of space was broken only by the hum of the Thunderstrike's engines, a sound that seemed both comforting and terrifying. The ship was new, humanity's latest creation, designed for a battle they had hoped would never come. Yet here it was. The Thunderstrike was not like the sleek, elegant ships of the Empire. It was raw, built for strength and power, a reflection of humanity's resolve. Its dark hull gleamed under the pale light of distant stars, sharp edges cutting through the darkness like a blade. Captain Nia Reyes stood in front of the command console, her fingers lightly brushing the controls, feeling the pulse of the ship beneath her. The crew around her worked swiftly, preparing for what was about to come. The weight of the moment pressed on her shoulders, but her face remained calm, betraying none of the fear that had gripped her heart since the first warning of the Imperial fleet's approach. She could feel it now. The Empire was coming, a tidal wave of destruction moving toward Earth with a fleet of 30 ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced. Their sensors had already picked up the massive signature of the Imperial Armada, their weapons charging, ready to turn Earth's defenses into ash. Captain Reyes knew this would be the fight of their lives. The room around her was filled with a low murmur of preparations, technicians running last-minute checks, soldiers and crew members slipping into their battle stations. Yet, despite the noise, there was an eerie stillness to the air. The entire crew was waiting for one signal, a signal from Reyes. She could feel their eyes on her, their hopes resting in her hands. There was no turning back now. "All stations report ready, Captain," Lieutenant Daniel Grant said from his station. His voice was steady, though Reyes could see the tension in his eyes. He had trained for this moment, just like everyone else, but now that it was here, it was different. The stakes had never been higher. Reyes nodded, her gaze flicking to the view screen in front of her. The fleet was closing in 30 ships, each brimming with the might of the Galactic Empire. Their weapons were already locked on Earth, ready to strike at the heart of humanity. "All hands, prepare for battle." A sharp silence fell over the bridge. Then, with a breath that felt like a release, Reyes gave the order. "Engage." Her voice was clear, the calm center of the storm. In that moment, everything seemed to shift. The Thunderstrike surged forward, the ship's engines roaring to life, a deep, thunderous sound that echoed through the ship. It was as if the very ship was alive, hungry for the battle to come. Reyes watched as the rest of the human fleet, along with their alien allies, moved into position. The Vindicator, Arrow, and Wraith joined the charge, their ships glowing in the dark, each one a weapon in its own right. Despite their size and power, the Imperial ships moved with surprising grace, their engines flaring as they prepared to unleash hell upon Earth. Admiral Drask and his fleet were confident, too confident. They thought humanity was weak, that they could crush them with a single blow. But humanity had learned, adapted, and now they had something the Empire hadn't counted on, the element of surprise. "Stay sharp, everyone," Reyes muttered under her breath, watching the Imperial fleet maneuver, their ships starting to charge weapons. She knew their tactics, they had studied them. They expected humanity to face them head-on, to fight with sheer force. But humanity wasn't going to play by their rules. "Captain, they are opening fire," Lieutenant Grant warned. A barrage of energy beams streaked across the sky, lighting up the vast emptiness of space. The first wave of shots from the Empire hit the shields of the Thunderstrike, sending ripples of energy through the ship. It shuddered, but held firm. The ship's shields, designed with a mixture of alien technology and human ingenuity, absorbed the energy. The crew braced as the ship rocked again, but they didn't falter. They couldn't. "Return fire, full power," Reyes commanded. The Thunderstrike's weapons fired, unleashing a torrent of energy that streaked toward the Imperial ships. The human fleet had learned to target weak points in the Empire's vessels, gaps in their shield designs, vulnerabilities in their engine cores. For a moment, it seemed as if nothing would be enough to stop the overwhelming might of the Empire. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the Empire's ships, the Fury, took a direct hit, its outer shields flickering before they failed completely. The Thunderstrike's energy beam tore through the ship's hull, causing massive explosions to rip through its side. The crew watched, stunned, as the Fury's massive frame began to break apart, its engine core destabilizing. A cheer erupted across the Thunderstrike's bridge, but it was short-lived. The Empire was not one to back down. They began to regroup, their ships closing in on the human fleet, adjusting their tactics. But humanity, bolstered by the support of their alien allies, was ready. The Xanthar, their forms flickering with energy, joined the fight, unleashing waves of electromagnetic pulses that disrupted the Empire's weapons systems. The Kriegsei ships darted in and out of the battle, striking from unexpected angles and damaging the Empire's communication arrays. The Aquilus provided crucial intelligence, directing the human fleet to weak points in the Imperial Armada's formation. Humanity, though outnumbered, struck with precision. The Empire's fleet was beginning to crack under the pressure, its once immense confidence now replaced with confusion. They hadn't expected a fight like this. The humans weren't the weak, insignificant species they had assumed. No, humanity was fighting for something greater than survival. They were fighting for their freedom. In the chaos of battle, the Thunderstrike and its allies pushed forward, using the Empire's overconfidence against them. Captain Reyes stood tall, her eyes locked onto the battlefield. With every strike, every evasive maneuver, the Empire's grip on Earth loosened. The battle was far from over, but humanity was proving something incredible, that they were not to be underestimated. And just as the Empire began to regroup, the final blow came, a coordinated strike from the Vindicator and the arrow that pierced through the Imperial flagship's shields, sending the massive ship into a slow, spiraling descent. The Empire had been dealt a devastating blow, and for the first time, they had learned the hard way, humanity was no longer their prey. They were hunters, and the Empire was about to become their prey. The cold walls of the Imperial Command Center hummed with a low, oppressive energy. It was a space designed for power, for the command of fleets and the crushing of enemies. Yet now, it felt almost suffocating, filled with a tension so thick that even the usual hum of the immense machines seemed quieter. Admiral Kalen Drask stood at the center of the room, his tall figure silhouetted against the darkened view of the galaxy outside. The stars twinkled like distant, indifferent watchers to the chaos that had unfolded below. Drask's cold, gray eyes narrowed as he stared at the view screen. The battle had not gone as planned. He had assumed humanity would crumble in the face of the Empire's might, that their small fleet would be nothing more than a fleeting annoyance. Yet, here he was, standing in the aftermath of a clash that had left the Imperial fleet reeling, a once unshakable force now shaken to its core. The Vanguard and its allies had proven to be far more formidable than he'd ever imagined. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. The humans, they had faced the full might of the Empire, and yet, they had fought back with a strength and resilience that had caught him off guard. Their tactics, their innovation, their sheer will to survive, it had been more than he expected. Much more. And now, as he stood in the heart of the Empire's most powerful command center, he had no answers. Subcommander Krell, who had stood quietly at Drask's side during the battle, spoke now, his voice low but filled with urgency. The reptilian officer's eyes were sharp, calculating, but there was a weariness in his tone. Admiral, we've seen their strength. We've seen what they are capable of. Continuing this war will only lead to more destruction, more loss of life on both sides. Drask turned to Krell, his expression hard, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, something he would never openly admit. For a moment, the silence between them stretched, heavy with the weight of the decision that lay before them. "You're suggesting we surrender?" Drask's voice was sharp, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. The very idea of surrender was anathema to him. The Empire had never been one to retreat, to yield to anyone. But here, in the aftermath of battle, with the bodies of his fleet's ships drifting in space, his confidence faltered. Krell did not flinch. Not surrender. A peace treaty. These humans are not like any species we've encountered before. They are resilient. They will fight again. And if we continue down this path, we will only face more resistance. It will be endless. We cannot crush them as we have crushed others. His voice lowered, almost contemplative. We need to offer them a way to stop this cycle of violence. A way to coexist, for now. Drask's eyes darkened. The thought of offering peace was repulsive, but the truth in Krell's words gnawed at him. The humans had shown an unexpected strength, one that could not be ignored. He had not anticipated their willingness to fight, to stand tall in the face of overwhelming power. The thought of facing them again, knowing they would return stronger, smarter, perhaps even with more allies, was unsettling. For the first time, Admiral Drask felt the weight of his pride. His mind flickered to the thought of what peace with humanity would mean. Would it be a surrender of sorts, or would it be a strategic retreat? The thought twisted in his gut, but the reality was undeniable. The Empire's grand strategy had been challenged, and to ignore the new threat would be foolish. "Very well," Drask said after a long pause, his voice as cold as ever, though there was a subtle edge to it now. "We will offer them peace." He glanced at Krell. "But make no mistake, we will not forget. We will rebuild our forces, and when the time comes, we will face them again." Krell's eyes softened, though only slightly. He nodded, acknowledging Drask's resolve, but his own expression remained guarded. "Understood." He turned to a nearby communications officer. "Prepare a transmission for Earth. We will offer them a peace treaty, recognizing their independence, but with the understanding that the Empire will return." As the officer began preparing the message, Drask's thoughts lingered. The words of the message would be clear: Earth would be left in peace, for now. But the Empire's eyes would never stray far from them. Humanity had proven itself a threat, and the Empire did not forget its enemies. The transmission was sent to Earth, a formal message filled with the cold, bureaucratic language of the Empire. "The Galactic Empire recognizes your planet's independence. However, know this, the Empire will return. And when it does, we will not be so lenient." As the message left the Imperial Command Center, Drask stood still, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The Empire had shown mercy, but this was not an end, it was simply a beginning. The humans, strong and unpredictable, had made their mark. And though Drask had agreed to peace for now, he would ensure that the Empire's might would one day be felt again. The galaxy had shifted. It was no longer a certainty that the Empire could control it as they once had. But that was not a failure. It was a challenge Drask had never backed down from before. He clenched his fists, the promise of the future clear in his mind. He would not let this defeat define the Empire. Humanity might have won the first round, but the Empire would return, stronger, more relentless than ever. The air on Earth was heavy with a strange mixture of relief and unease. In the wake of the battle, humanity had taken a brief moment to breathe, but there was no celebration of victory, only the quiet understanding that this was not the end. From the cities to the hidden underground bunkers, Earth's people knew the truth: they had won. Yes, but the war was far from over. The Empire might have retreated, but its shadow loomed large over their future. General Rhea Martinez stood in the center of a large command room, the soft glow of holographic maps casting shadows across her face. Her eyes, though tired, burned with an unshakable resolve. She had seen the carnage, heard the cries of the wounded, and felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. But she wasn't fooled by the quiet that had followed the battle. The Empire was not one to accept defeat easily, and Earth had only delayed the inevitable. Beside her stood Admiral Zara Velk, her gaze as cold and sharp as ever. Velk's expression was unreadable, her mind already on the next step. She had spent years fighting for the survival of humanity, and the victory they had earned was hard-won, but it would mean nothing if they were not prepared for what was coming next. "We cannot rest, General," Velk said, her voice low, but heavy with authority. "This victory has bought us time, but that's all. The Empire will return stronger than before. We need to be ready." Martinez nodded, her gaze flicking to the large windows of the command room. Outside, Earth's night sky stretched into infinity. It was a sight that should have been beautiful, calming even. But tonight, it felt cold. Alien. The Empire had made it clear that their reach was vast, and Earth's quiet corner of the galaxy was now a target. Captain Nia Reyes was walking through the shipyard, her eyes scanning the ships that had been repaired, refueled, and now stood ready in the dark silence of space. The Vanguard, her vessel, was docked, its once glorious hull now scarred by battle. The damage was minimal, but the toll on the crew had been far more significant. They had faced an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever known, and many would never be the same. Yet, as Reyes stood before the ship, there was a spark of something more, something that had grown within her during the chaos of the battle. Her crew had fought valiantly, and now, it was her turn to lead them once more. "We're not done yet," Reyes muttered to herself, her breath misting in the cool night air of the docking bay. She knew that no matter how much they had accomplished, the Empire was always watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The Vanguard's crew had already begun preparations for the next phase of the fight. Officers scrambled across the deck, double-checking equipment, ensuring that the ship's weapons were fully operational. There was a sense of urgency in the air, a tangible weight that pushed everyone forward. The crew was focused, determined to be ready for whatever came next. Reyes walked up to the bridge, where the rest of the crew had gathered. Lieutenant Daniel Grant was already in his seat, his face set in a serious expression. Lieutenant Ilra Finn stood by the navigation console, her fingers dancing over the keys as she set new course projections. The team was working with precision, but the look in their eyes told a different story, one of weariness, tempered by the knowledge that they had to keep going. "We can't keep running," Reyes said, her voice firm, but tinged with the weight of the situation. "We have to fight. We're going to show the Empire that Earth will not fall, no matter how many times they come at us." Grant looked up from his console, his face grim. "And we'll be ready, Captain," he replied, his voice steady, but filled with the unspoken truth they were all in this together. No one would back down. Not now. Outside the windows, the stars blinked coldly in the distance, distant and indifferent. The Vanguard, along with the ships of their alien allies, floated in space. The Aquilus, the Kriegsei, and the Zenthar, their ships, sleek and otherworldly, moved quietly beside humanity's vessels. The alliance that had formed between these species had given humanity a fighting chance, but the fight was far from over. The Empire would return. There was no doubt about that. As the crew continued their preparations, General Martinez entered the bridge, her presence commanding immediate attention. She stepped toward Captain Reyes, her face a mask of calm determination. "We're prepared, Captain," Martinez said, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "The defenses are in place. Our allies are ready. We won't make the same mistakes again." Reyes nodded, her eyes fixed on the view screen, watching the ships hover in the vast expanse of space. "We won't let them win. Not now. Not ever." The tension in the room was palpable, yet there was something else, an unspoken bond that connected each person on this ship. The crew, the soldiers, the allies, they were all fighting for the same thing: freedom. The Empire had underestimated them, thinking that humanity was weak, that they would fall under the weight of imperial might. But they had fought back. They had shown their strength. And now, the Empire would learn that Earth would not be easily conquered. The crew of the Vanguard prepared for what was to come. They had survived the first battle, but now, they would face something greater, a war that would determine the fate of their world. And they would fight, not just for Earth, but for the freedom of all who had been oppressed by the Empire. The message had been sent, and the fight was far from over. The hum of the Vanguard's engines softened as the ship drifted silently in space. The vastness of the cosmos stretched before them, its endless expanse filled with stars that seemed distant, indifferent to the struggles of those below. Inside the ship, the crew was still, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the control panels. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as they all realized that what they had achieved wasn't a victory, it was only a temporary respite. Humanity had fought the Empire, and for now, they had held their ground. But the battle was far from over. The Empire, though momentarily beaten back, would not forget their defeat. Drask's cold eyes, the unyielding force of his fleet, would return. It was inevitable. But humanity was no longer the insignificant species it once was. They had shown the galaxy that their spirit couldn't be crushed, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. They had faced a giant and struck back with fire, with resolve. And they would do it again. As the crew of the Vanguard stood ready for what came next, their minds heavy with the knowledge of what awaited them, a new sense of determination began to settle over them. They had no choice but to keep fighting. They had no choice but to stand tall, to show the Empire that they would not kneel. Captain Reyes stood alone at the viewport, her hands clasped behind her back. The dark expanse of space before her was both an unknown and a challenge. For a moment, she allowed herself to reflect. The sound of her crew preparing for the next phase of their mission filled the room, and she knew they were ready. But were they truly prepared for the war that was to come? Were they ready to face the Empire again, knowing how ruthless it could be? She straightened her posture, her eyes scanning the stars. There was no time to dwell on what they had lost or gained. The Empire would return, and humanity would be ready. They had allies now, species that had suffered under the Empire's cruelty, united by a shared desire for freedom. This wasn't just humanity's fight anymore. It was the fight of everyone who had ever been oppressed. As the crew gathered, Captain Reyes spoke with conviction, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. This battle is not over. The Empire may have retreated, but they will return, and we will stand against them. Together, we will show the galaxy that humanity's place is not at the mercy of an empire. We will fight for our freedom, for our future, and for the lives of every being in this galaxy who longs for peace. We are ready. The room was silent for a moment, before the crew exchanged determined glances. There was no fear in their eyes, only a shared understanding of what they had to do. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of their will to survive, of their determination to fight for something greater than themselves. Outside the window, the stars seemed to shine brighter now, not as cold and indifferent as they had felt before, but as if they were watching, waiting. The Empire had underestimated them. The galaxy had underestimated them. But humanity had proven that it would fight for its place among the stars, no matter the cost. As the Vanguard prepared to leave Earth's orbit, the crew worked quickly, efficiently, and with purpose. They were ready for the next chapter of their struggle. This is not the end, Captain Reyes thought. This is only the beginning. And as they flew off into the unknown, their hearts resolute, the message was clear, the fight for survival and independence was far from over. Stay tuned for the next chapter in humanity's battle for survival and independence. The Empire may have retreated, but they will be back and humanity is ready. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Let's spread the message that humanity will stand tall against any empire that dares to threaten their freedom. The fight is only beginning, and the next chapter promises to be even more intense.